You're being let go for performance discrepancies. That's what my new boss said, not realizing I'd brought receipts. 6 years of loyalty erased with one meeting. But the evidence I carried wasn't just proof, it was a bombshell. And when I dropped it, the entire department would never be the same. My name is Samantha Blake. I'm 35, and until yesterday, I was the customer relations manager at American Financial Group in Boston. 6 years of my life dedicated to that place. 6 years of early mornings and late nights, of canceled dinner plans and rescheduled vacations. 6 years of putting the company before almost everything else. When my assistant mentioned a last-minute meeting with HR on my calendar, I thought nothing of it. Quarterly reviews were approaching, and I'd been preparing my team's performance reports. My numbers were strong, they always were. Customer retention in my division had improved by 22% since I took over. Our client satisfaction scores had never dipped below 94%. These weren't just statistics to me, they represented real relationships I'd cultivated, real problems I'd solved. I walked into the conference room to find Russell Draper, my boss of just 4 months, sitting beside Denise Hall from HR. The atmosphere was immediately tense, no small talk, no coffee offered. "Please, take a seat, Samantha," Denise said, her voice betraying no emotion. I'd always found her difficult to read. But today her professional mask seemed especially well-crafted. Russell couldn't even look me in the eye as he slid a folder across the table. "We've been reviewing the department's performance metrics, and we found some significant discrepancies in your reporting." I opened the folder to find printouts of my quarterly reports from the past year, with red circles around various figures. Beside each page was another printout, allegedly the actual numbers from our system. According to these documents, I'd been inflating my team's performance by nearly 20% across the board. "This is clearly grounds for immediate termination," Russell continued, finally meeting my gaze with what looked like practiced disappointment. "However, given your tenure here, we're prepared to offer you 2 weeks severance if you sign this NDA and resignation letter today." Denise slid another document toward me. "This would allow you to tell future employers you resigned rather than being terminated for falsifying company records." My hands began to shake, not from fear, but from a white-hot anger that started in my chest and radiated outward. 6 years of exemplary service, and they thought they could dispose of me with a fabricated accusation and a paltry 2 weeks' pay. "May I see my complete file?" I asked, proud of how steady my voice remained. Russell and Denise exchanged a glance. "I don't see how that's relevant at this point," Denise replied. "It's relevant because I'd like to see exactly what I'm being accused of falsifying, and when these alleged alterations took place." I reached for my purse, which I'd placed on the floor beside my chair. "But actually, I think I already know." The confusion on their faces turned to visible concern as I took out my phone and opened my personal email. "You seem to be under the impression that I've been doctoring my numbers," I said, scrolling through my inbox. "But I think you'll find it's actually the other way around." I found what I was looking for, an email I'd sent to myself just 3 months ago. When I first noticed something strange happening with my reports, I'd titled it "Insurance Policy." And that's exactly what it was. For the past 6 years, I've been backing up all my daily reports to my personal email. It started as a productivity hack. I wanted to be able to review things on the go, but about 3 months ago, I noticed something odd. I turned my phone around to show them. My numbers kept decreasing after I'd submitted them. At first, I thought it was a system glitch. The color drained from Russell's face as I continued. So I started taking screenshots before and after. And what do you know? My customer acquisition figures dropped exactly 18% between submission and the official records. Meanwhile, Brent Carlo's numbers increased by, guess what, exactly 18%. Brent, the colleague Russell had been grooming to replace me. The colleague who'd been mysteriously promoted last month to a newly created position that outranked mine. "That's a serious accusation," Denise said, her composure slipping for the first time. "Do you have any proof that someone actually altered these numbers?" I smiled. "I'm so glad you asked." I turned back to my phone. These changes always happened on Wednesday and Friday evenings, between 7:30 and 8:15 p.m. Interesting timing, since that's when Russell told the department he was running system maintenance checks, and we shouldn't worry if we saw any temporary fluctuations in our data. I pulled up another email and showed them the timestamps. The IP address logs I'd requested from IT under the guise of troubleshooting a recurring glitch, and screenshots comparing the original reports with the altered versions. I also took the liberty of checking our security protocols. Our handbook clearly states that while company data can't be shared externally, employees are permitted to keep personal records of their own work product. So these backups? Completely legitimate. Russell's face had gone from pale to ashen. Denise looked like she was calculating rapidly, trying to find an exit strategy. But wait, there's more, I continued, a strange exhilaration taking hold of me. I wasn't the only one who noticed something strange. After I spotted the pattern, I spoke with a few colleagues. Turns out, Emily from Strategic Accounts, Nadia from Client Services, Zara from Analytics, and May from Product Support all experienced similar discrepancies. All women. All reporting to men who seem to get mysterious performance boosts. I placed my phone down on the table, screen up, evidence glowing for all to see. So before we continue this conversation about my termination, I think we need to discuss the systematic manipulation of performance data that's been happening under your watch, Russell, and the fact that it seems to disproportionately affect the women in this department. Russell pushed back from the table. This is ridiculous. You can't possibly. I can and I have, I interrupted. And I think the ethics and legal department would be very interested to see what I've compiled, not to mention how it might affect those discrimination lawsuits the company settled last year. Denise stood up abruptly. I think we need to pause this meeting and reconvene with additional parties present. I completely agree, I said, gathering my things. I'll wait here while you get whoever you need. Within 30 minutes, the conference room had transformed. Our general counsel, the chief operating officer, and the head of the ethics committee had joined us. Russell sat as far from me as possible, while Denise attempted to maintain her professional veneer despite the sweat beading on her forehead. I walked them through everything again, this time more methodically. I showed them the timestamps of when my reports were altered. I demonstrated how the IP address matched Russell's workstation. I presented screenshots, bonus reports showing the financial impact of these manipulations, and testimonials from my female colleagues who had experienced the same issue. And this has been happening for how long? Asked Margaret Chen, our COO, her expression grave. I first noticed it 3 months ago, shortly after Russell took over the department. But when I went back through my archives, I found similar patterns dating back about a year, though less frequent and less dramatic. I believe it started under the previous manager, though to a lesser extent. The head of ethics, a stern man named Victor Patel, leaned forward. Ms. Blake, if what you're showing us is accurate, this represents a serious breach of our ethics policy and potentially violates several employment laws. It is accurate, I said firmly, and I'm prepared to provide everything I've gathered to any investigating body you deem appropriate. The next few hours were a blur of statements, document reviews, and system audits. By the end of the day, Russell had been escorted from the building, his company accounts frozen pending investigation. Denise was placed on administrative leave while the HR department's involvement was assessed. And Brent Carlo, upon learning of the investigation, submitted his resignation before he could be questioned. I sat alone in my office late that evening, emotionally drained, but vindicated. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Chen. Can you meet tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office? The following morning, I arrived at Margaret's corner office to find her and Victor waiting for me. Samantha, first and foremost, I want to apologize on behalf of Ameritan. Margaret began. What happened to you and your colleagues is unacceptable and contrary to everything we claim to stand for as an organization. Victor nodded in agreement. Our preliminary investigation confirms everything you presented yesterday. We've already identified 6 other employees who appear to have been victims of similar manipulations. So what happens now? I asked. Margaret leaned forward. That's partly up to you. We're prepared to offer you a significant promotion to Director of Customer Strategy, with a substantial compensation adjustment to account for what you would have earned had your performance been properly recognized. Additionally, Victor added, we'd like you to join our newly formed Compensation Review Committee. We need someone with your attention to detail and ethical standards to help us rebuild trust. I considered their offer. Part of me wanted to walk away, to find a company that hadn't betrayed me so fundamentally. But another part recognized the opportunity to create real change from within. I'll accept on one condition, I said. I want to lead a project to implement a new performance tracking system, one that records every change made to performance data, who made it and when, like a blockchain for our metrics. Margaret smiled. That's exactly what we were hoping you'd say. Over the next few months, I worked closely with our IT department to develop a transparent tracking system that would make it impossible for anyone to manipulate performance data without leaving a clear trail. Every change would be logged, time-stamped, and attributed to a specific user. Multiple people would need to verify major adjustments, and employees would receive notifications whenever their data was modified. The system went live 3 months later, and the results were immediate. Within weeks, we identified 6 more cases of performance manipulation, all affecting women or minority employees. The patterns were unmistakable once we had the tools to see them. Not everyone was happy with the new transparency. Logan Pierce, a senior manager who had been close with Russell, seemed particularly agitated by the changes. When I was scheduled to present our quarterly results to the executive team, my first such presentation since my promotion, I discovered that someone had altered my slides just hours before the meeting. But our new system had done its job. Not only could I see that changes had been made, but I could see exactly who had made them and when. I arrived at the presentation with both versions, the sabotaged slides and the originals, along with the log showing Logan's user ID and timestamp. Before I begin, I'd like to address something, I said to the assembled executives. It appears that some of my presentation materials were altered this morning at 7:42 a.m. from Logan Pierce's workstation. I've provided both versions for your review, along with the system logs. Logan's face contorted with rage. You're making that up. There's no way the system could. Actually, it can, and it did. Margaret interrupted. That's precisely what this new system was designed to do. Logan, security will escort you to HR after this meeting. With Logan's disruption neutralized, I delivered my presentation, showcasing how the departments previously led by women who had been pushed out were now thriving under new, transparent leadership. Our customer retention rates were at an all-time high, and employee satisfaction scores had improved dramatically. The fallout from our reforms wasn't without challenges. Some longtime clients, particularly those with close relationships to the ousted managers, took their business elsewhere. But for every client we lost, we gained 2 new ones, drawn by our renewed reputation for integrity and transparency. The most remarkable change came in our workforce demographics. Within 6 months, our retention rate for female employees had increased by 47%. Applications from women and minority candidates doubled, and departments led by women began consistently outperforming others in both revenue and customer satisfaction metrics. A year after that fateful meeting where I was nearly fired, I received another invitation from Margaret. This time, she wanted to discuss my nomination to the executive committee. As I sat in her office, she slid a proposal across her desk. "This is your idea, isn't it?" she asked with a knowing smile. I looked down at the document titled Ethics Transparency Initiative. It outlined a plan to publicly publish our company's ethics metrics. Everything from pay equity data to promotion statistics broken down by gender and race. It is, I admitted. I think it's time we took our commitment to transparency beyond our walls. If we're truly doing the right thing, we should be willing to show it. Margaret nodded. The board has approved it. We'll be the first financial services firm to publish this level of detail about our internal practices, And several of our competitors are already asking about our tracking system. They are? I hadn't expected the idea to spread so quickly. Yes, in fact, I received a call yesterday from a woman named Janet Torres at Tech Vision in California. She said you'd spoken to her about implementing something similar in her company. I smiled, remembering the LinkedIn message I'd received from Janet a few months ago. She'd read an article about our reforms and reached out for advice on addressing similar issues in her tech firm. Word travels fast, I said. So does change when it's driven by people like you. Margaret replied, "The question is, what do you want to change next?" As I left Margaret's office that day, I thought about how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't kept those backups, if I hadn't noticed the pattern, if I hadn't spoken up. One person with evidence could indeed change an entire system. And I was just getting started. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can bring to a fight isn't anger or influence, it's proof. Receipts, as they say. Because when you have the evidence, even the most entrenched corruption can't stand against the light of truth. They thought they could erase 6 years of my work with one meeting. Instead, they gave me the opportunity to transform not just my career, but an entire industry's approach to fairness and accountability. And as for Russell, Denise, and the others who tried to push me out, they never saw it coming. Because the evidence I had wasn't just something they could dismiss, it was something they never imagined I'd been collecting all along.